Well, it looks like the United States might reinstate the $7,500 tax credit for GM and Tesla right when they don't need to anymore. Oh, the irony. Let's take a look. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So both of these events sort of happened simultaneously, and so I figured I would talk about them together. But first, I'm going to start with a CNN Business review of the legislation that's in Congress right now and has a reasonably decent chance of actually passing and becoming law. The key takeaway in terms of battery electric vehicles is that the $7,500 tax credit will be reinstated for vehicle manufacturers that have made more than 200,000 vehicles. So far in the US, that's only GM and Tesla, but there will be others that will hit that eventually. There are a whole bunch of different caveats, and it's actually a much better bill than it used to be. Like the rebate is now actually something that you can get at the dealership or at the Tesla showroom rather than having to wait until the next tax year to get the money back. So that's actually really, really cool, but it's also totally unnecessary. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, so CNN Business, Peter Valdez de Pena, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name, sorry about that. Tesla and GM buyers would get EV tax credits again under Democrats' climate bill. If we go down here, there are a lot of details to this, but kind of the big takeaway about this is that currently there's a 200,000 vehicle cap per manufacturer, and both GM and Tesla hit that a while ago with the Chevy Bolt and then with the Tesla Model 3. They both went well past 200,000 vehicles, left that in the dust a long time ago. So anyway, Hyundai and Ford and other manufacturers are still getting a $7,500 tax credit. There are some new wrinkles to this that are quite different than the old ones, but as opposed to the previous legislation that never actually made it, that had a union made, I think it was an extra $4,000. I don't know. I think it was a little bit variable. But anyway, there was a bunch of extra money for union made vehicles. That's no longer on the table, no longer part of the bill. So we'll just touch on some of the highlights here. First of all, the proposed legislation would remove the 200,000 vehicle per manufacturer cap in a win for some of the biggest names in the EV market. Automakers like Tesla and GM that have already sold more than 200,000 electric vehicles can no longer offer the tax credits, essentially raising the price of their vehicles compared to their competitors. Of course, we all know that GM is really not producing a whole bunch of electric vehicles right now, so this doesn't affect them very much, but it will as they start to release the Chevy Blazer and the Silverado and things that, vehicles that are EVs and stuff. But this really does affect Tesla, but you can see it doesn't particularly matter because there are still massive wait times for Teslas. But anyway, it does effectively make a Tesla $7,500 more than another vehicle manufacturer's car that's the exact same price on the market. There's also this new wrinkle, which is that now there is a limit for how much a family can make and still take credit for the vehicle and how much the vehicle itself can cost. So basically for a new vehicle, it's $150,000 per person or $300,000 if you're filing jointly for a family. But anyway, if you make more than $150,000 per person, that's a cutoff and you're not allowed to get the credit anymore. That seems relatively reasonable. I mean, if you're making that kind of money, then the $7,500 credit is not that valuable to you. Anyway, you're going to buy what you want no matter what. More interestingly here, and probably more to the point for most people, is that there will be a cap on vehicles that will qualify. So as you can see here, for plug-in trucks, vans, SUVs, it's $80,000. But for sedans, that type of vehicle like the Tesla Model 3, it's only $55,000. So even though the Model Y falls well below $80,000, and I think even if it's completely tricked out, I don't know, maybe if you add FSD, it might bounce over $80,000. And there's a little bit of a question about whether things like full self-driving and other optional packages would actually count against that value or not. But anyway, the Tesla Model 3, I believe the long range and the performance, or at least the performance, is over $55,000. They're right around there right now. I think they're like $58,000. So anyway, they would not qualify. So there would be a question of whether Tesla would lower the prices or not. But we're going to get to that whole can of worms in just a minute. So anyway, just remember that as we talk about the next part. But before we leave this article, two more very important points. Number one of the most important changes, though, is that EV buyers won't have to wait until they file their taxes to get the tax credit. Instead, the incentive would be treated like a rebate and applied at the time of purchase at the dealer. So if you think about that, usually when you go buy a car, you have to put down like $4,000 or $5,000 or something like that. Effectively, this can become your down payment now. The way that the rebate used to work is you used to buy the car, so you'd buy it in July or August or something, and then you have to wait until next February, March, April when you file your taxes, and then you get to take that off of your taxes. So, it took a long time. I mean, if you bought a car in January of 2022, it could be March of 2023 before you actually see that money. So there's a really, really long wait. Plus the fact you have to come up with the $5,000 or $6,000 or however much you want to put down as a down payment for the car. So this new change is actually a really big deal. It means that you can effectively write a check for $7,500, which can be your down payment for the vehicle. So you can lower the price of the vehicle loan, obviously, and get a credit for $7,500 as if you'd written a check to the dealership or to the Tesla showroom for $7,500. So that's actually a really, really substantial and very, very nice change. I very much appreciate that. And finally, there are some things about the manufacture of the chemicals and the batteries themselves. So basically over time as the decade progresses, and this bill is supposed to expire in 2032. So we're looking at a 10-year bill. But as the bill progresses, we're looking at, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80% of the value of a battery pack has to be manufactured in the United States. And also the actual minerals that are part of the battery pack have to be manufactured in countries that the United States has a fair trade agreement with. So basically what we're looking at here is a way of pushing China away as the center of the universe for BEVs without actually saying it. They're saying, and I actually approve of the fact that they want more value brought into the United States and into North America. It does include Canada and Mexico as well. But there is a benefit to the environment for having things geographically co-located, obviously, because if you're not shipping your minerals halfway around the world and then halfway back around the world again to build a battery, there's a really big environmental benefit to that. But also it seems pretty clear that this, favored nation status or whatever, the fair trade status of the countries that are going to be dealing with the United States in terms of minerals and stuff is a way of pushing away countries that the United States don't feel are participating in the global economy in the way that they'd like. And I think that that's probably, psst, psst, China, that kind of thing, right? Under the table. That's what they're saying. Anyway, of course, that's just my opinion about that, but it does seem fairly reasonable that that might be one of the main countries that the U.S. is targeting with this part of the bill. So that's the bill. It's just part of a gigantic, Build Back Better bill or whatever Biden's calling it now. But anyway, a gigantic infrastructure bill, but it is $360 something billion worth of that bill, not just the EV tax credits, but a bunch of other things as well on top of that. But anyway, there's a bunch of stuff going on here, and it's really cool to see the Biden administration trying this. But the irony is the second article that I also read within the last 24 hours. And that article is this Cleantechnica take on a Bloomberg article. So as you can see, it says Bloomberg declares that the tipping point has been reached both in the US and globally as well. So the lead here is, although acceptance of EVs varies from country to country, obviously, a pattern has emerged. Once 5% of new car sales go fully electric, everything changes, according to a Bloomberg analysis of the 19 countries that have made the EV pivot.
Here we go, pivot! Pivot! Pivot!
And by the by, if you don't know it, the United States, even though it's a pretty big laggard, hit 5.3% last year. And so we're actually at the tipping point ourselves in the United States, well behind many other countries, but still it's pretty remarkable that we're actually at that point right now. And by the way, I really like this line here. Some have even compared driving an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle, to smoking. It will not just be unusual, it will be antisocial and detrimental to your health. So in other words, if you see somebody smoking, most people these days kind of like reject people who smoke and say, ew, gross habit, stay away from me. The prediction here is that that will be the case for ICE vehicles as well, right? Once most everybody is driving electric vehicles and there aren't fumes being produced, when somebody does, you go like, oh, that's so gross, right? I mean, just today I was following behind a vehicle that was, a diesel truck, and it sped up really fast and a big black cloud smoked out behind it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. So I, for one, will not miss when that stops happening. So I want to point this out because this is kind of remarkable here. Not just the quote, but also who the quote is from. At 5% penetration, a new technology starts the almost vertical part of the S-curve adoption as popularized by Tony Seba. So they're actually talking about Tony Seba and the S-curve of adoption in a Bloomberg article. This is like absolutely mind-blowing that they're talking about this kind of stuff. Of course, those of us who have been following Tesla and other technology companies for a long time, we know this stuff, but most people out there don't know that. And so regular people are going to have picked up Bloomberg in the last couple of days and read this and found out about Tony Seba and found out about S-curve adoptions, which is amazing. So let's look at a couple of graphs here. This is Europe in specific. Europe has been very much at the forefront of this. So the front runner here obviously is Norway. They're at about 75%, I think something like that, almost 80% EVs in terms of market share per year. So that's new vehicles being purchased. Obviously, there are internal combustion engine vehicles on the roads as well, but those will get phased out over time. But you can see that once they hit about 5%, it took a while to get to 5%, but then they went up. There was a bit of a hump here in Norway, and then it continued on up, and they're now at a very, very high adoption rate. And really, really sorry for that advertisement. That is disgusting over there. Anyway, but you can see these other countries, we got the 5% mark right here where my mouse is down here. And as they hit that mark, it takes a while, and as they hit that mark, they really start moving up rapidly. So why does this actually happen at 5%? Well, according to Tony Seba and other people, what happens is the early part of the S-curve, remember, is the early adopter phase. So it's people who pay way too much money for things because they think it's cool, or they think it helps the environment, or they want to be different, or whatever. They just want to help out companies and stuff. So those early people are spending a lot of money and using a technology that most people think is not ready for prime time yet, but they push it and they push it and they push it, and we get to Wright's Law, and every time you double production of something, for example, batteries, battery electric vehicles and such, the price drops by a certain predictable percentage. And so once that goes on for a while and you have these early adopters paying, the prices come down a little bit. And so more and more people can afford it, and more people, so we have the super early adopters and then the early adopters, and then we start getting into the mainstream. And right around 5 to 10% is where you go from early adopters to mainstream. And that 10% to 70 or 80% is almost linear. I mean, again, you can look at Norway here. Once it went up, it went pretty much linear. It stopped being like curve and stuff like that. So what happens is the S-curve is flat, then it tips up, then it goes linear, and then of course eventually you get to a point where you're so saturated with the market that it drops off. And there's always going to be the 5 people that still use flip phones and still drive internal combustion engine vehicles. But anyway, they'll be the laggards at that point. So it goes really, really fast. Now, it took Norway 11 years. Most of these other countries are going to go much more quickly. Norway was actually rather slow in this process. But the main takeaway here is that once you hit that 5%, it's pretty much irreversible. Once you go from the early adopters to the mainstream adopters, adoption is going to happen. It happens with smartphones, with telephones themselves, with refrigerators, with televisions, with automobiles back in the 20th century. So, you look at this kind of thing and the adoption has been pretty consistent. Once you hit that 5% mark, it just takes off, and it does it on its own, which is the reason why I wanted to talk about both of these articles together, because we're talking about the United States creating a very expensive rebate program. In other words, spending a huge amount of taxpayer money to give us all rebates on vehicles that people can't even get right now. Tesla has 6+ month waiting lists for their vehicles. A lot of other companies do as well. And most of these companies can't get enough material to build the vehicles that they're trying to build. And this tax incentive plan is supposed to last a decade. I mean, by 2032, looking at 10 years from now, look where Norway is, and they were slow to do the adoption curve, right? So if you're thinking about that, if the United States is only as fast as Norway, it'll be at 80% by 2032 without anybody doing anything. It won't require these rebates or anything. So in my mind, what the United States is doing is wasting a ton of money, a lot of my money, taxpayer money, to give to people to make a transition that they're already going to do because of the fact that the US is already over that 5% tipping point. Now, of course, as a consumer who's got a Cybertruck on order, I will be very happy to get $7,500 discount on the Cybertruck, although honestly, probably what Tesla will do is just raise the prices of everything by $7,000. So it'll be a wash. So basically, Tesla will be making a bunch of money, which I guess means is that me as a Tesla shareholder can also be happy because Tesla is going to make more money and more profits and stuff like that. But it seems like it's at the expense expense of printing an awful lot of money that the US doesn't have right now. So I actually think this is a bad idea. What they should do in my mind instead is actually help them build the charging infrastructure and help build more electric vehicles. That would be a better way to spend this money than giving it to consumers. But it's politicians, and politicians like to be able to say, hey, I just effectively gave you a $7,500 check, so you're going to be happy and vote for me next time, right? So I'm pretty sure that that's why they're doing it. Obviously, nobody listens to me, so whatever I say doesn't really matter. But if somebody did listen to me, I would say spend that money in better places on making the transition. Spend the money on building out new charging station infrastructure. Spend the money on helping out the power grid in the United States, because it's going to need that as well. And spend the money on helping to refurbish factories and make them more up to date so they can build EVs more efficiently. So anyway, I find it rather ironic that the United States is putting together a bill to spend a great deal of money to do something that's going to happen anyway. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. By the way, road trip to Starbase and also to Austin, Texas is coming up next week. So keep an eye out for that. I will be doing on the road videos. So you can check that out and follow us along. And I think I'm going to be at the Tesla shareholders meeting next Thursday, which is a week from when I'm recording this. So that'll be really awesome if that happens. So I'll definitely give updates assuming that I'm there. And of course, if you really want to stay on the know, just join the team on Patreon and you can find out daily what's going on. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.